Who let the old guy onto the base? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Sergeant First Class Marcus Webb didn't bother lowering his voice. He watched the elderly man shuffle past the equipment staging area, a mop bucket squeaking alongside worn work boots. Hope he doesn't throw out his back pushing that thing. Laughter rippled through the group of Navy SEALs gathered around a mountain of tactical gear. None of them noticed the old man pause. None of them saw his weathered hands tighten briefly on the mop handle before he continued toward the maintenance closet. And none of them could have known that this moment would change everything they thought they understood about service, sacrifice, and the men who came before them. If this story moves you, type Ranger in the comments before you continue watching. The staging area at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado buzzed with controlled chaos on that September morning in 2019. 18 members of SEAL Team 7 were preparing for a 6-week deployment to an undisclosed location in the Middle East. Deployment prep was always stressful, but this one carried additional weight. Intel suggested they'd be operating in austere conditions with limited resupply options. Every ounce mattered. Every cubic inch of pack space was precious. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Torres surveyed the scene with growing frustration. His men, some of the most elite warriors on the planet, were struggling with what should have been a basic task: packing their bags. "This is ridiculous," Torres muttered, watching Petty Officer Second Class Jake Brennan attempt for the third time to zip his deployment bag closed. The zipper strained, fabric bulging obscenely at the seams. "I've got everything on the required list, Chief. It just won't fit." Brennan was 26 years old, a veteran of 4 deployments, decorated with a Bronze Star for actions in Afghanistan. He could swim 5 miles in open ocean, navigate by stars alone, and place a shot within an inch of his target at 800 meters. But right now, he looked like a college freshman trying to pack for spring break. The problem wasn't unique to Brennan. Across the staging area, similar scenes played out. Highly trained operators, men who could field strip an M4 blindfolded, were wrestling with deployment bags like they were fighting uncooperative enemies. Clothes spilled out. Compression straps groaned. Zippers protested with metallic shrieks before inevitably failing. "Just stuff it harder," Sergeant Webb suggested from his position nearby. He was attacking his own packing challenge with brute force, jamming a fleece jacket into an already overstuffed corner of his bag. "That's what she said," someone quipped, earning tired laughs. Webb was 31, built like a concrete pillar, with arms that could do pull-ups for hours. If anyone could muscle their way through a packing problem, it was him. But physics, it turned out, was indifferent to physical fitness. The bag remained stubbornly uncooperative. Chief Torres checked his watch. They had 4 hours until equipment inspection. 4 hours to accomplish what was proving impossible. He pulled out his phone, already drafting a request for additional cargo space on the transport aircraft. It would mean paperwork, delays, potential complications at their destination. Standard solutions for a standard problem. That's when the old man appeared again. He'd finished mopping the hallway outside the staging area, and now stood in the doorway, leaning slightly on his mop handle, watching the chaos unfold. His name was Henry Castellano, though nobody in that room knew it yet. To them, he was just another base maintenance worker, invisible in his faded blue coveralls with facilities stitched above the breast pocket. 75 years old, with hands spotted by age, a face carved by time into deep crevices, and eyes the colour of faded denim. He'd been working at Coronado for 11 years, ever since his wife Margaret passed, and he'd needed something to fill the empty hours. He mopped floors, emptied trash cans, fixed leaky faucets, and stayed invisible. That's how he preferred it. "Hey, Grandpa, you need something?" Webb called out, noticing the old man's presence. His tone carried that particular brand of dismissiveness reserved for those deemed irrelevant. "Bathroom's down the hall. Unless you're looking for the bingo hall. That's off base." More laughter, louder this time. Henry didn't move. His eyes travelled slowly across the scene, taking in the overstuffed bags, the frustrated operators, the mountains of gear scattered like casualties across folding tables. Something flickered in those faded eyes. A memory, perhaps. A recognition. "You're folding them wrong." His voice was quiet, almost lost in the ambient noise. Webb turned fully now, crossing his arms. "Excuse me?" Henry nodded toward Brennan's bag. "Your clothes. You're folding them wrong. That's why they won't fit." Webb exchanged glances with Torres, a silent communication of amused disbelief. "Appreciate the tip, old-timer, but I think we've got it handled." "Clearly," Henry said, and there was no malice in his voice, just simple observation. He gestured with the mop handle toward the chaos surrounding them. "That's why you're 4 hours from inspection with half your team still fighting with their bags." Torres stepped forward, ready to defuse whatever this was becoming. "Sir, we appreciate your concern, but this is specialized military equipment. It's not like packing for vacation." Henry's expression didn't change. "I know exactly what it is. Deployment bag NSN 8465-01-604-6541. 80 litres internal capacity, expandable to 95 with external straps, MOLLE compatible, designed to hold everything a man needs to survive and fight for extended operations." The staging area went quiet. Torres blinked. "How do you—" "And I know," Henry continued, his voice carrying now with unexpected authority, "that you're packing it like amateurs. Stuffing, cramming, folding flat like you're loading a suitcase for a cruise." He let go of the mop handle, letting it clatter to the floor. "You want everything to fit. You need to Ranger roll it." The term hit the room like a grenade. Ranger roll. Some of the younger SEALs exchanged confused glances, but Torres felt something shift in his chest. He'd heard that term before, years ago, from an instructor during his earliest days of training. An old-school technique, supposedly, developed long before fancy compression bags and vacuum-sealed storage. "With respect, sir," Webb said, and his voice had lost some of its edge, "we've been trained in—" "You've been trained in modern methods," Henry interrupted, and he was moving now, shuffling toward Brennan's bag with purpose that belied his age. "Modern methods that assume access to support infrastructure, resupply chains, and transport capacity. They teach you efficiency, not necessity." He reached the bag and, without asking permission, began pulling items out. T-shirts, socks, underwear, the fleece jacket, tactical pants, everything that Brennan had spent 20 minutes cramming inside. The young SEAL started to protest, but Torres held up a hand. "Let him work." What happened next would be described by everyone present as something close to magic. Henry took a black T-shirt, laid it flat on the table, and folded the bottom hem up about 4 inches. Then he folded the sides in toward the center, creating a long rectangle. Starting at the collar, he began rolling tightly, fingers moving with muscle memory so ingrained it seemed effortless. When he reached the bottom, he tucked the roll into the folded hem, creating a tight, compact bundle that fit in the palm of his hand. "This," Henry said, holding up the finished roll, "is a Ranger roll, invented by men who had to carry everything on their backs for weeks at a time, men who understood that every inch of space could mean the difference between having dry socks or getting trench foot, between having a clean shirt to change into after an operation, or wearing the same bloody rags until they rotted off your body." He set the roll down and reached for the next item. "The compression is tighter than flat folding. The bundle is more stable, won't unfold in transit, and you can fit roughly 30% more in the same space." Brennan's jaw had gone slack. 30%? Henry didn't answer. He was already rolling, hands moving in hypnotic rhythm. Shirt after shirt, each one transformed into a compact cylinder. Underwear became tiny barrels. Socks were paired, rolled, and tucked into themselves like miniature sleeping bags. The fleece jacket, which had been the primary obstacle to Brennan's packing success, was laid out, folded precisely, and rolled with such efficiency that it emerged no larger than a can of soup. The staging area had gone completely silent. 18 Navy SEALs, men trained in dozens of lethal skills, stood watching a 75-year-old janitor perform what could only be described as origami with tactical clothing. "Compression bags are nice," Henry continued as he worked, "if you've got access to them. Vacuum sealers are better, but neither of those help you when you're humping 60 miles through jungle, and your resupply gets redirected because some staff officer can't read a map." He finished the last item and began arranging the rolls inside Brennan's bag, not randomly but with clear purpose, larger items at the bottom, smaller ones filling gaps like a 3-dimensional puzzle. This technique, on the other hand, works with nothing but your hands and whatever surface you've got available. I've done it on rocks, on the hood of a Jeep, on a poncho laid over rice paddies. He zipped the bag closed. It closed smoothly, easily, with room to spare. Brennan stared at his bag as if seeing it for the first time. That's everything? Everything that was in there, plus about 20% more space than you had before. Henry straightened, pressing a hand to his lower back. Enough for extra water, ammunition, or whatever else you might need when things don't go according to plan. Things never go according to plan. Webb stepped forward, his earlier arrogance replaced by something else entirely. Sir, where did you... who taught you... He trailed off, seemingly unsure how to finish the question. Henry's eyes met his, and for a moment the old man seemed to look through him, seeing something far away. February 1968, 77 days before Tet. A staff sergeant named Monroe showed me. 2 weeks later, he was killed at Hugh City. Bled out in my arms while I tried to hold his guts inside his body with hands younger than yours are now. The words fell into silence. Chief Torres's voice was barely a whisper. You served in Vietnam. 3 tours, Henry said simply. 75th Infantry Regiment, Rangers. The designation sent a visible ripple through the assembled SEALs. Rangers. The word carried weight that transcended generations. Torres felt his phone buzz in his pocket, but he ignored it. Sir, why are you... why haven't you... He gestured vaguely at the mop, the coveralls, the maintenance work. Henry almost smiled. Why haven't I mentioned it? Why would I? I did my job 50 years ago. Now I do this one. Both needed doing. Both serve a purpose. He turned back toward his mop, conversation apparently over. Wait. It was Brennan stepping forward. Could you... would you show us? All of us. He looked around at his teammates, saw the same hunger in their eyes. Show us the right way? Henry paused, hand on the mop handle. For a long moment he didn't move. Something passed across his face, a procession of emotions too complex to name. Memory, pain, pride, loss, duty. My wife used to say I couldn't stop teaching even if I tried, he said finally. She called it my curse. He let go of the mop again and turned to face the room. All right. Everybody empty your bags, everything on the tables, we're starting over. What followed was unlike any training session those SEALs had ever experienced. Henry moved from station to station, those weathered hands demonstrating techniques that seemed both ancient and revolutionary. The Ranger role was just the beginning. He showed them the skivvy tuck, where underwear was rolled inside socks to save space and create ready-made changes. The utility wrap, where items were arranged in sequence based on how quickly you might need them, most urgent on top, comfort items at the bottom. The dead space fill, identifying and utilizing every gap, every pocket, every cubic centimetre of neglected space. Your bag is your lifeline, Henry said as he worked. Everything you need to survive and fight is in there. Pack it like it matters, because it does. Pack it like your life depends on getting to any item within seconds, because someday it might. Webb was at his own station now, carefully rolling a shirt under Henry's watchful eye. Not so tight at first, the old man corrected gently. Start loose, tighten as you go. The fabric needs somewhere to compress into. Webb nodded, adjusted, tried again. His third attempt earned a small nod of approval, and the big sergeant grinned like a kid who'd just earned a gold star. Sir, Torres said during a brief lull, may I ask you something? Henry's hands never stopped moving, but he tilted his head slightly, listening. What unit exactly? You said 75th Infantry, Rangers, but... Company L, 75th Ranger Infantry, Henry said. Long-range reconnaissance patrol. We called ourselves LRPs. 4 to 6 men dropped deep behind enemy lines, sometimes for weeks at a time. No support, no resupply, no extraction if things went sideways. He finished rolling a pair of tactical pants. We learned to pack because we couldn't afford not to. Every ounce we saved meant another day of rations, another magazine of ammunition, another chance to make it home. The staging area had transformed. Where chaos had reigned, order now emerged. Bags that had been bursting at the seams now closed smoothly. Items that had been crammed haphazardly were now arranged with purpose and precision. And something else had changed too, something less tangible, but equally profound. The way the SEALs looked at Henry. The old janitor they'd dismissed, laughed at, considered irrelevant. They were seeing him differently now, not as what he appeared to be, but as what he was. A warrior, a teacher, a link to a tradition that stretched back further than any of them had walked the earth. Chief Torres! The shout came from the entrance. Everyone turned to see a figure in navy dress whites striding into the staging area. Captain Rachel Munoz, base commander, her face wearing an expression that mixed urgency with something else harder to identify. Captain, Torres straightened, as did every other SEAL in the room. We weren't expecting... At ease, Munoz said, but her eyes had already found Henry. They locked onto him with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to the situation. "Mr. Castellano, I should have known I'd find you here." Henry stopped rolling. For the first time since he'd begun teaching, his hands went still. "Captain Munoz." "I just got off the phone with my father," she continued, moving toward him. "He saw the news about our deployment prep, knew I was stationed here, and called to ask if I'd ever met you. Imagine my surprise when I learned that the man who's been mopping my floors for 11 years is the same man who saved my father's life in Ladrang Valley." The silence that followed was absolute. "Ladrang," Torres breathed. The name needed no explanation for anyone in that room. November 1965. One of the bloodiest battles of the Vietnam War, where American forces first clashed with North Vietnamese regulars in large-scale combat, where valor and sacrifice were tested to their absolute limits. "Captain, I don't think," Henry began. "Staff Sergeant Henry Castellano," Munoz interrupted, and her voice had taken on a formal cadence. "Distinguished Service Cross, 2 silver stars, 3 bronze stars with V device, Purple Heart with 4 oak leaf clusters." She was reciting from memory now, each word deliberate. "Credited with saving the lives of no fewer than 37 American servicemen across 3 tours of duty. Refused promotion to Sergeant Major 3 times because, and I quote from his service record, 'I can't lead from behind a desk.'" Webb's face had gone pale. Brennan looked like he might be sick. Even Torres, who had seen and done things that would give most people nightmares, felt something twist in his chest. "My father was a second lieutenant at Ladrang," Munoz continued, her voice softening. 22 years old, fresh out of West Point, convinced he was going to die in those elephant grass fields. His platoon was pinned down, taking fire from 3 directions, no way to retreat, and then a Ranger recon team appeared out of nowhere. 4 men who had no business being there, no orders to engage, no obligation to do anything but complete their own mission and exfiltrate. She stepped closer to Henry. "But they didn't do that, did they? Staff Sergeant?" Henry's jaw tightened. "We did what anyone would have done. You did what no one expected you to do. You held a secondary position for 9 hours while my father evacuated his wounded. You carried 2 men who couldn't walk on your own back. You gave your team's entire water supply to soldiers you'd never met because they'd been without for 2 days, and when the extraction finally came, you were the last man on the helicopter. My father said you wouldn't leave until every single American was accounted for." The old man's hands trembled slightly, not from weakness but from something deeper. Memory, perhaps. The weight of moments that never fully release their grip. "We lost Martinez that day," he said quietly, "and Williams. Good men. Better men than me." "My father named me after Martinez's sister," Munoz said. "Rachel. He said it was the only way he could think to honor them. Both of them." She turned to face the assembled SEALs. "For 11 years this man has walked these halls. He's cleaned your bathrooms, emptied your trash, fixed your broken equipment, and not once, not a single time, has he mentioned who he is or what he did. Not to me, not to anyone. I only found out because my 91-year-old father recognized his name on a maintenance roster I happened to mention during a phone call." She turned back to Henry. "Why, Staff Sergeant? Why didn't you ever say anything?" Henry was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady but coloured with an emotion that seemed almost too large for words. "Because I didn't do it for recognition, Captain. None of us did. We did it because it needed doing. Because there were men who needed help, and we were the ones who could give it. That's all service ever was to me. Not medals, not glory, not stories to tell at bars, just the work that needed doing." He looked around the room, at the young warriors who stood watching him with new eyes. "Same reason I mop these floors. Because they need mopping, because cleanliness matters for health and safety, because even small jobs deserve to be done right. That's what the army taught me. That's what I've tried to live." Brennan stepped forward. His eyes were wet, though he'd never admit it later. "Sir, I owe you an apology. When you first came in, I thought, we all thought. You thought I was just an old man who didn't understand your world," Henry finished for him. "Son, I've been that old man for longer than you've been alive. I know exactly what people see when they look at me, and most of the time I prefer it that way. Invisible means unbothered. Unbothered means I can do my job in peace." Torres cleared his throat. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to make a request." Henry raised an eyebrow. "I'd like you to officially advise our team on deployment preparation. Not just today, but going forward. There's clearly knowledge being lost between generations, techniques and wisdom that aren't being passed down. You could help us bridge that gap. I'm a janitor, Chief, not a trainer. You're a ranger, Torres corrected, once and always, and you just taught 18 SEALs something none of our official training ever covered, something that might save weight, save space, save time, maybe even save lives. He gestured at the neatly packed bags. That's not nothing, that's legacy. Henry looked at the bags, at the men, at Captain Munoz, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Something shifted in his weathered face. Not quite a smile, but close. I suppose I could check in from time to time, make sure you boys aren't stuffing your bags like teenagers. With respect, sir, Webb said, and there was genuine warmth in his voice now. We'd be honoured. Speaking of honour, Munoz said, I have one more matter to address. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. I've been in contact with the Secretary of the Navy's office. There's going to be a ceremony next month. Long overdue recognition for several Vietnam-era veterans whose service records were, shall we say, inadequately acknowledged due to the political climate of the time. She handed the paper to Henry. Your name is on the list, Staff Sergeant. The Medal of Honor Review Board has been examining your actions at Le Drang and at 16 other engagements where your original commendations were downgraded for, quote, administrative reasons, unquote. Henry's hands shook visibly now as he unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the words, and for a moment he seemed very far away. Margaret always said this would happen someday, said the truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep you try to bury it. Your wife sounds like she was a wise woman. Wisest I ever knew. He refolded the paper carefully. She passed 11 years ago. Same week I started working here. I needed something to do with my hands, something to keep me from drowning in the silence. His voice caught briefly. She would have liked knowing this. Would have said it was about damn time. The ceremony happened 6 weeks later. Henry stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., surrounded by flags and dignitaries, while the President of the United States placed the Medal of Honor around his neck. In the audience sat 18 Navy SEALs who had specifically requested leave to attend. They stood at attention as the citation was read, tears streaming openly down faces hardened by combat. But for Henry, the more meaningful moment came 3 months after that back at Coronado. A new plaque had been installed in the equipment staging area. It read, The Castellano Center for Tactical Readiness, dedicated to Staff Sergeant Henry Castellano, USA, retired, ranger, teacher, servant leader, do the work that needs doing. Below the plaque hung a simple display case containing a weathered pair of coveralls, a mop, and a single perfectly rolled black t-shirt. Henry still visited the base every week, though no longer as a janitor. The new maintenance staff handled the mopping and the trash. Henry's job now was different. Teaching. Young warriors from every branch gathered to learn techniques that no manual contained, wisdom that no PowerPoint could convey. And always, he began each session the same way. Let me tell you about a staff sergeant named Monroe, he would say, weathered hands already reaching for the first piece of fabric. February 1968, 77 days before Tet. He taught me something that saved my life more times than I can count. Now I'm going to teach it to you. Because that's how knowledge survives. That's how legacy lives on. Not in medals or ceremonies, but in the hands of those who carry the work forward. The room would go quiet. The rolling would begin. And somewhere, in that sacred space between generations, the thread that binds all warriors across time would grow a little stronger. What appeared to be just an old man with a mop became a bridge between eras, between branches, between the seen and the unseen sacrifices that hold the line between darkness and light. Henry Castellano passed away peacefully in his sleep 4 years later, at the age of 79. His funeral at Arlington National Cemetery drew over 3,000 attendees, including active duty personnel from every branch of the military and veterans spanning 7 decades of service. The SEAL team, 7 operators who had been present that September morning, served as honorary pallbearers. Marcus Webb, the same man who had once dismissed him as the old guy, delivered a eulogy that moved hardened warriors to open weeping. He taught us that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform, Webb said, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. He taught us that honour isn't about recognition. It's about doing what needs to be done, every single day, whether anyone notices or not. He taught us how to roll a t-shirt, and in doing so, he taught us everything we needed to know about being men. At the graveside, just before the final rifle salute, a young army private approached the casket. Without a word, he placed a single item on the polished wood. A perfectly rolled black t-shirt, tucked into itself exactly as Henry had taught. The Ranger roll. A technique, a legacy. A reminder that the greatest warriors among us often wear no uniform at all, that the deepest lessons come from the quietest teachers, and that every generation owes a debt to those who walked the hard roads before them. Some say, if you visit the Castellano Center late at night, you can still hear the soft whisper of fabric being rolled, folded, tucked into place by hands that knew the weight of every ounce and the value of every inch. Henry Castellano spent 50 years living proof of a simple truth. Heroes don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like janitors. Sometimes they push mop buckets. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough to pay attention, they teach you something that changes the way you see the world. If this story reminded you that respect isn't given to uniforms but earned by actions, if it taught you that knowledge worth having is worth passing on, if you believe that the quiet servants among us deserve our attention and gratitude, then subscribe to this channel. We're here to tell the stories that need telling, about the heroes who don't ask for recognition, the warriors who serve in silence, and the moments that remind us what honor really means. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and the next time you see an old man doing a job that seems beneath him, remember Henry Castellano. Remember the Ranger role. Remember that you never know what battle someone has already fought, or what wisdom they're waiting to share with anyone humble enough to learn.